speaker who will discuss China. Yoram Evron is an assistant professor in the Department of Asian Studies at the University of Haifa and director of the China program at INSS. He was a visiting fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Study, RSIS, in Singapore, and he has written article, books, chapter on China's nuclear security and military procurement, as well as China-Middle East relation. He wrote an article which I guess got a lot of attraction in Israel, titled "Between Beijing and Washington, Israel Technology Transfer to China," which has been a very contentious issue. Yoram, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Camille, and also I'd like to thank the organizers of the conference for the invitation. The concept of strategic stability is always complex, especially for me, which this is not my direct field of, this is not something I deal with every day, but I guess that also for the experts, this is a complex or maybe a vague, to a certain degree, vague term. And this is for sure the case when it comes to China and the US because, well, both because of their special role in the international system and also because the nature of their relations. First of all, speaking about their relations, we are talking about two big powers which are both competitors and at the same time they collaborate on various issues, and there is a high level of interdependence between them. So this is one issue. The second issue, of course, this issue attracts a lot of attention recently. We are talking about a status quo power versus probably rising power, which adds a strong dimension of tension between them. I'm going to speak here about two different dimensions of strategic stability in their relations. These dimensions or aspects are complementary. The first one is maybe the classic dimension. I'm talking about the nuclear capabilities, strategic deterrence, second strike capabilities of both of them, etc. The second one, which probably occupies a larger part of China's strategic thinking and efforts, is keeping under control the confrontation with the US over what seems like a global power transition. In this respect, the challenge is how to avoid a big power conflict in a situation of growing Chinese ambitions and capabilities in regions and fields in which the US has crucial interest, mostly East Asia and also South Asia and Central Asia, issues of energy and of course international trade, etc. Starting with the classic dimension of strategic stability, China invests many technological and diplomatic efforts to maintain a reliable second strike capability. Already in the 1980s, it realized that the American progress in anti-ballistic missiles capabilities, together with its superior air power in East Asia, can nullify the limited nuclear capability it had acquired so far. Accordingly, for the last 2.5 decades, China has worked hard to improve the accuracy and resistance and reliability of its nuclear strategic forces. As part of it, and this is only a partial list, it replaced its liquid-fueled missiles with solid-fueled ones. It developed SLBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles. It developed and deployed mobile launchers. It developed some inferior version of MIRV warheads. It probably continues to produce fissile materials, and there are reports that all in all, in general, we can assume that its missile industry is improving. China has acquired a better self-reliance capability than it used to have. Still, not only that China's nuclear capability remained weak compared with the US, and I'm speaking mainly about the US, not of Russia, still it seems that Beijing hasn't changed its basic approach to minimal effective deterrence. First, the results of China's strategic R&D efforts are quite limited. According to the available information, open resources, China is something like 240 nuclear warheads compared with the 5,000 American warheads, of which only 40 are intercontinental and 50% of them are obsolete liquid-fueled missiles. In addition, its most advanced missiles, the intercontinental, the ICBM Dongfeng 41 and 31A, and its more advanced SLBM are still under development. They are not deployed, and the result is that most of its ballistic arsenal can reach mostly Russia and maybe probably some other East and South Asian targets, but not the US. China also operates diplomatically to maintain strategic stability with the US, mainly by attempting to block American initiatives that can undermine its second strike capability or block US efforts to upgrade its arsenal. Most notably, there are several examples here, most notably are China's efforts to delegitimize the US efforts or intentions to deploy strategic systems to outer space, to deploy anti-missile systems in East Asia, also maybe South Asia, and also its negative response to President Obama's initiatives. I mentioned it before, for a world free of nuclear weapons. The Chinese reaction was that any such initiative should start first with the US and Russia. Yet, most of these moves, I'm speaking mostly about the diplomatic moves, are probably aimed at maybe to make the US look bad, not necessarily to shift the strategic balance between them. The only initiative or the only efforts that probably really matters strategically are those concerning East Asia. In East Asia, it is important for China to maintain strategic balance as much as possible because probably China sees this region as the focus or the location of future conflicts, not or intercontinental conflicts between China and the US. Still, intercontinental conflicts are not the entire or the only strategic threat to China, and there are also small-scale conflicts that may erupt between two. But here, probably China assumed that both itself and the US are rational enough. Yair mentioned it before, referring to other cases. Both of them are rational enough to avoid such development. As for the second dimension of strategic balance, here the situation is probably more complex. I'm talking, of course, about the China-US power transition, and in this respect, until the 2008 global financial crisis, China handled it quite quite, well, I wouldn't say easily, but it was more easy than today. It adopted a passive and compromising foreign policy, mainly. That was the main tool, a political tool. This approach was adopted in the early 1990s when the China threat theory appeared, and as part of it, Beijing used to reject the claims that it intended to become a big power. It also adopted a good neighbor policy, and whenever a conflict with the US erupted, it eventually backed off. This started to change in 2009 when China adopted a proactive and assertive foreign policy. Actually, in 2009, the Chinese leadership made a decision to start playing a more dominant role in world politics, and here are just, I'm going to present just a few examples. First, it became harder for the US to get Chinese cooperation in various international initiatives. The Copenhagen Climate Change Conference in 2009, to get China's approval in the last sanctions resolution on Iran, Security Council resolutions on Syria, and so on. Also, following the global financial crisis and later on the territorial disputes in East Asia, China started to call the US to act more responsibly in East Asia, something that usually used to be the opposite. Usually it was the US who called China to be more responsible. Now we see Chinese calls for the US, please be more responsible. Secretary of Defense Hagel, in his last or recent visit in China, was criticized for this point. Also, China started to approach US traditional military allies. It conducted a military exercise with Turkey in 2010. It tried to promote arms sales in the Middle East to US traditional allies, and so on. And there are more examples for that. Taking all this together, it seems that while many of the disputed issues between China and the US are regional or bilateral, in fact, they are fighting. The US and China are fighting over China's role as a central pole in the international system. And in such circumstances, any disagreement or confrontation or dispute can have broad implications and consequences. And the tension between China and the US will probably only get worse. More specifically, China accuses the US for trying to undermine its development, and according to China, there are several specific things that the US does that threats its national security. First of all, undermining its social and political stability through the media, the internet, even indirectly promoting or allowing terrorism inside China, etc. It encourages separatist trends in China, mostly Taiwan, Tibet, Xinjiang. The US, so the Chinese accuse, may block China's sea lanes in case of crisis. The US, according to Chinese accusations, uses global regimes and organizations to reduce China's economic, or to block China's economic development, and so on. So the question is, what China does against it, when obviously nuclear deterrence is probably not relevant here. I'm going to list here to present something like five items in this list, when probably only one of them is pure militarily. The military means well, I put it differently. The option of military conflict between China and the US is a nightmare for anyone involved, and still this option cannot be ruled out. For China, it is clear that it cannot win a war with the US, but it can make the US pay a huge price in terms of both casualties and money. And probably China's military build-up efforts are going in this way, trying to make the U.S. to pay a huge cost in any future confrontation. The economic means are probably more dominant. Here is, first of all, the lending. China lends the U.S. huge sums of money through purchasing of American bonds, which in turn creates American or U.S. dependence on China. Actually, China provides the American a high standard of living, and any damage or any problem in this respect may have, again, significant political implications. Also, in the economic field, U.S.-China confrontation, which to a large degree is managed through American allies in East Asia, is also quite problematic when, on the one hand, China has open conflicts with most of, or maybe all of, American allies in East Asia, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, etc. At the same time, each one of these countries, or for each one of these countries, China is the biggest or the second, the largest or the second largest economic partner. Also, fourth point, after China joined the international community and became a major member in various important forums, of course the UN Security Council, but also the WT and other forums, the US needs China to approve all kinds of decisions, initiatives, and here China, or in addition, China may also be a key holder to several hotspots in the world, thanks to its good access to states or regimes like the Iranian, North Korean, Pakistani, etc. And finally, to address the threat of American maritime blockade, China seems to build a network of ground transportation based on oil and gas pipelines and railroads, together with other measures that it conducts, such as building huge oil reserves in its territory. It's not clear to what extent such measures can solve the problem, but if the main threat that China prepares for is a short-term or limited military crisis or conflict, then together with a show of brutal force and diplomatic blitz, such measures can reduce its vulnerability. To sum up, taking all these measures together, it seems that beyond maintaining a nuclear arsenal of, I would say, minimal effectiveness, but still effectiveness, it seems that it intends to increase the U.S. dependence in such a way that it allows China to handle American possible blockades and other pressure measures, and to deter the U.S. from using force against it by showing increasing capability and willingness to fight for its vital interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much.